Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Welcome to 2022. We're starting off with a bang and we're back for more SciTech Culture, ready to rip into all the topics and discussions that will no doubt carry us through the year, and it'll be an interesting year to be sure. Happy New Year, Steve. Welcome back.
Happy New Year, everyone. Yeah, it's great to be back. Always is.
Absolutely. We've got a bit of a rainy day here in Melbourne, and uncharacteristic for summer. I've got a couple of shots that I'll overlay a little bit later with that, which is always good. And I just wanted to start with, I actually took those shots with a new device that I procured in the last week, which is a 13 Mini, actually, of all things.
Oh, very nice.
I ended up, I think I've mentioned before, I had an 11 before as a secondary 4K camera that I use, and I've just used Apple's trade-in program to get the 13 Mini in, especially after you described some of your experiences, and I quite like it. So it's good to add it to the stable and just have that secondary camera. And I just wanted to point out, I had a look at 4K, just standard 4K cameras in the shop, Sony, Canon, whatever it was, and it's the same price. Like and you know what the irony is that the 13 Mini can shoot 4K 60, and all of these cameras that cost the same as this phone can only do 4K 30. So
what's going on?
So to me, it just seems like, what the hell is all this about? So, yeah, I've been impressed with some of the camera features, etc. Not that I wasn't expecting that wouldn't be the case, but it would be good to put it through the rotation. I got the 12 Pro Max recording me today, but I'll probably put the 13 Mini through its paces in future episodes. Obviously, couldn't hold it up to the camera if it was filming us right now.
You give me post-purchase anxiety now. I think I would have liked a Mini.
Absolutely. I will say, though, that just in holding it, it reminds me a lot of the old iPhone 4, the first iPhone that I used.
Don't say that.
It's kind of got that similar sort of feel to it, just with a screen stretched out to all edges.
The 4S is my favourite phone.
Yeah, it was yep, they were really good phones back in the day. One other thing I did want to touch on, and again, we'll probably revisit this later in the year, is the old streaming subscriptions. And I actually have now considered cancelling Netflix and putting it in the casual rotation after they sent me an email saying they were upping the price as of next month. So I thought, what am I actually watching on Netflix recently that will justify me having to keep it every month? So,
what are the prices now been?
So it's $15.99 for the plan I've got, which is I think you can up to 2 or 4 HD screens or whatever at any one time. But they were going to raise it to $16.99, but that doesn't sound like a lot, but I think it's the principle of the thing. And it's coming. They've done it before. But you then sort of sit there, you get hit with that, and you think, well, I haven't really been watching a lot off it recently, so maybe I can demote it for a couple of months and see if they can come, re-entice me at some later point with something else.
With a 3-month free offer.
Yeah, indeed. Like Paramount Plus did, which I'll probably cancel next month when that offer ends. See, it's ruthless out there. It's ruthless. Alrighty, let's start with the pandemic. We can't get away from it. I would have loved to have started 2022 without having to touch on this, given how much airtime we've given to this topic in the last 2 years, but we can't escape it because 2022 has started with a big Omicron bang in Australia with, skyrocketing case numbers. There was 51,000 reported today in Victoria. I believe it was 45,000 in New South Wales. So it's only going to go up during the course of January and the rest of this month. So we're in this really bizarre sort of phase at the moment, I think. We were talking about this before we got on, about the fact that there are no lockdowns in place. There are some restrictions. but more to do with density limits and mask mandates and that sort of thing. Not preventing anyone from going out and about and doing stuff, but the psychological impact of these high case numbers, et cetera, has effectively meant that people are, from a psychological perspective and I guess physically, locking themselves into their own homes until this wave kind of finishes. So you kind of go out onto the street now and it's a bit like lockdown. No one's out, no one's driving, no one's walking on the street. You know, the Melbourne CBD is usually packed to the gills kind of thing with people, but nothing's happening at the moment. And I just find that extraordinary that we're still in this place. And I guess the one good thing for the government is they don't have to worry about locking people down when, you know, people are locking themselves down at this point.
Well, I guess that's right. I think, you know, with a lot of the restrictions, they've cut out a lot of the options for socialisation. So, I don't know, maybe people are catching up with each other at home in the parks or going for long drives now. I mean, those restrictions are a little bit more relaxed. We're over 90% vaccinated in this country. And look, if you look at the numbers in hospital, they're probably higher than the state authorities would like, and they are putting pressure on the hospital system. But we're not really at a super critical point, and that's probably due to our vaccination program. So I guess we just have to sort of, muddle our way through it now, just like everyone else in the world. No one's got the answers, and I don't think anyone can truly predict, even though we know what might be likely, but no one can truly predict what will happen next. Let's just hope it swings humanity's way away from the viruses away.
Yeah, exactly. And not another variant that causes havoc. I guess one of the big things that has been a feature over it's really just been the last week or two, really, is this massive pivot towards rapid antigen tests to determine what's been going on. And I don't think this is unique to Australia. I've seen it overseas as well, but just the PCR testing facilities are being slammed and, leading to huge backlogs to the point where it becomes redundant. There's no point in getting a PCR test if you don't get the result for a week, kind of thing. And that was a big shift, I thought, as well. And it just seems like, it's kind of like playing a game of catch-up to find out the equilibrium in terms of what will actually work in this scenario, given that we're getting such high case numbers at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, I think it was basically the sort of health sector that was loving the PCR test because they're getting accurate numbers day by day and, building their little charts and predicting what will happen next. And they overlooked the fact that people want to travel. Borders are open now, and the requirement for everyone. If you think 250,000 people wanted to go to Queensland, as was reported, that's 250,000 PCR tests across 4 states or whatever. So that's a lot. That's a lot of tests, and obviously the system wasn't going to work, and probably should have been a bit better prepared because they've been using rapid antigen tests now for at least 6 to 8 months everywhere else in the world, and they're reliable, they're accurate, and I think they're enough to tell someone whether they should travel or not. So we're getting there now, and hopefully we'll start getting supplies of those in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that the 51,000 cases that Victoria reported today, which is we're recording this on a Saturday, about half of those came from self-reported rapid antigen tests that Victoria is, I guess, leading the country in terms of this whole self-reporting mechanism, which I'm sure other states will start adopting and would think that New South Wales might benefit from getting a better understanding of case numbers if that's the case by using that system.
Oh, exactly. I think the other thing I'd add is 51,000 is a huge number, but a large proportion of those will be asymptomatic. Yeah. So, I think that's the positive side of all of this. So while the numbers are high, really the pressure on the health system, although it's definitely there, it's not critical. So obviously something's working in our favour at the moment. Let's just hope that we can keep it within the means and make sure that the health system is fine and the people working in that system are fine as we move forwards.
Absolutely. All right, let's pivot towards the US, and we haven't, spoken about Trump for quite a while. It's the anniversary of January 6th this week, the Capitol riot, etc., and obviously Trump's featuring again in the news in the sense that, the idea that eyeing his role in that particular incident, but also the idea that he's going to be running for 2024. Why anyone thinks that that's not a thing, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that he's gonna run, and aside from the fact that between Trump and the pandemic, I think it's kind of monopolized our time in the last 5 or 6 years or so. I just find it interesting that the US is in quite an interesting position these days, just perceptually. You ask yourself, is the media making it out to be like they're in a massive state of crisis? Are they in a state of crisis? How big is the Trump forces kind of thing? Are they going to be able to impact stuff? And I think it'll be an interesting couple of years in terms of where the US goes. Starting, I think we'll probably hit it by the end of the year in November when we get the results of the midterm elections and see where the country goes from there. Because if the Republicans take back the House, as is widely expected because of political inertia that happens at those elections, it could be a very interesting couple of years. But having said that, the more that they keep saying, "Oh, this is going to happen," it doesn't. I think we've gotten to the point where it's a little hard to predict what's going on. The norms of what you would expect that's happened in the last 40 years of politics, particularly in the US, has kind of been thrown out the window, really.
Well, I think that's just how rapid the world's become with social media. You used to be able to predict how someone was going to fare, 3 months out from the polls. We have say the Australian election, in 3 months. So you used to be able to make a pretty good prediction now, but I think these things change so rapidly. A good campaign, a good social media campaign that reaches the right people can sway the right people, and you get results you don't expect. So it's impossible to say what will happen. I mean, it looks at the moment like Biden's struggling, and that might not be him as the president, but probably the last 10 years of political decision making within the US, and that includes everything from back to Obama, back to Trump's term, and now what Biden is trying to deal with, which is probably everything since the GFC. So not casting any sort of judgment on that, but he's got a lot on his plate, and it's not very smooth for him at the moment. So who knows where it'll go? I mean, when you've got that sort of, uncertainty surrounding what will happen next in the US, I think that just makes it very difficult to predict anything. Mm. And even for Trump, he might be looking good now, but he could be. He could be like Biden in another 2 years.
Well, it's interesting because he was actually I saw a couple of stories where some of the more right-wing, hardcore conservative types, although the real conservatives wouldn't call them conservatives, but that actually went after him, for being too old, for being too out of touch. The fact that he got booed when he was advocating for the fact. Well, I don't know if he was advocating for vaccines, but rather he took the vaccine and then got booed for it. That I wonder if that'll be an interesting thing to see as well. I wonder if he created the monster kind of thing and then it's out of his control.
Well, it's funny. I was watching Primary Colours the other night. It was on TV, and I thought about where politics has gone in the last 20 years or so. And you think about it. There's a photo opportunity or a social media opportunity, or let's just call it a media opportunity at every point now, not just for the positive side. All you need to do is have someone boo at the same time as somebody's trying to, do a positive media presentation for themselves, and suddenly you've got a negative media event. So who can predict what's going to happen next? It might not be the manipulation of the actual posts on social media, but it'll be the manipulation of the creation of the posts before they get to social media. It's
Well, it's enough to do your head in, to be sure.
It certainly is. And I think, as we say, the world's grappling with a number of problems, geopolitical, but also economic. And also, I think, obviously the pandemic and and trying to, fight climate change at the same time. So there's so much going on. Who knows what will actually have the most impact moving forward and how that will shape our world in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to something a bit more fun, which is some good tech stories. And we've covered CES in the past, but I think this year's Consumer Electronics Show was actually a little bit more muted, only because it was kind of partially virtual. It was partially done in person. There was companies that didn't actually attend this year, more of them that didn't attend this year. So there was kind of a sense of, maybe there's a trend that maybe it might not be a thing going forward if too many of these companies start to pull out and just do their own events, because it's been proven during the pandemic that companies can just hold their own virtual events and don't need to bother, paying fees somewhere to, in a trade show hall to rent space or do any of that stuff. But having said that, there was still quite a bit that was interesting this year, and I did want to touch firstly on the Dell XPS 13 Plus laptop, because if I wasn't in the Apple ecosystem and I was going to buy a Windows laptop, the one that I would probably buy is the Dell XPS 13, even the older versions. The new version that they've pulled out, this Plus version, does look very futuristic, I think. It's kind of got a modern sort of sleek look to it, minimalist look to it. But having said that, it can have like the edge-to-edge keyboard. It can have the the touchpad that isn't actually discernible on the laptop. It can have the bezel-less experience and all that. But if it's still running Intel chips that run as hot as ovens, which apparently. We'll get to this a little bit later too. Intel did announce some new chips, but they're still running hot from what we can see. It just kind of puts you off. I mean, it's funny in looking at this particular laptop. While I was out, looking at some tech and in the shop and stuff the other day, and I was just having a look through all the Windows laptops. None of it still grabs me. In the sense that when you look at the cost for what you're paying for, the whole myth around Apple costing more just goes out the window as far as I'm concerned, because they're charging just as much for all these things.
Well, it's funny. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I've had the M1 now for a few months, and it looks like probably any Apple laptop in the last 10 years, is a little bit thinner. But to me, the gap between Apple now, or this laptop now, and any of the PC offerings is as great as when I've got my first Macintosh 220. And versus a beige 386 box. That's how big the difference is. This is a way better computer.
Absolutely.
Way better.
Absolutely. And just to touch on some of those announcements that Intel had made, which I thought, and the part that I really wanted to focus on is, that's great. They've been, they'll say that they're innovating, but they're really reacting to the Apple Silicon transition and this use of sort of high performance cores and high efficiency cores, and they've now built chips that are coming that are going to have that kind of split happening between them. But I thought it was interesting that they showed off a particular chip. And they used the same graph that Apple used in terms of power efficiency and all that sort of thing. But then they claimed that their chip was above all the other lines from that same graph. But the thing that they don't point out is that, and this is where the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips are so impressive, is that regardless of whether you're plugged in or not, you're getting the performance, the 100% performance. Whereas you still have to be plugged in with any laptop or machine that has these Intel chips in them. And they do say in the specs, if the M1 Max chip is only needing to run at 30 watts, but the Intel chip is running at 115, That's where you get your nice toaster oven, high fan sort of experience. I'm sure they'll be able to deliver on performance, but I guess I still haven't seen anything in what they've announced that would suggest that they're really moving it along.
I think what's really interesting here is that Intel have been caught napping for the last decade. Apple have been working on these chips now, or working with these chips in the iPads and their phones for over a decade. So they've actually probably got a lot more experience and a lot more capability when it comes to designing their silicon chips, as opposed to what Intel has. And Intel now is, probably looking at what Apple's got, probably pulling apart M1 Pros in the shed and saying, well, we can build that, and they probably can, but they don't have experience of running these in devices. They make chips, but they don't make laptops. And the difference is Apple has been making all-in-one devices now for 30 years, or if not longer. So they certainly know or have that experience within their company. So I think Intel, like you say, they might be able to have a chip that can be just like an M1 within 12 months, 18 months, but I think it'll be like another 3 or 4 years after that before they actually catch up.
Indeed. Just some other things I wanted to touch on from CES, just to round this out. There was a couple of interesting things. I think it was a BMW car that could change color. Just at the flick of a switch. I thought that was kind of nifty. It felt very, Minority Report or something, something from the future where, I feel like going out in the car, I want the car to be black today, so I'll just flick a switch and it goes out like that. I like, this is the sort of thing I do enjoy at CES, where they announce that sort of stuff where it doesn't ever really seem like it'll be something, at least not anything soon, but it kind of catches your eye in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, I've found it interesting looking through CES this year, and like the changing colour of the car, that's a technology that's been around 10 years. And what I actually thought that we've actually seen this year is probably a lot of the technologies that have existed for 5 or 6 years, just in a better design form. So they look better. So if you look at the new screens or some of the other, robotic or, automated functions that you've got, these functions have been around now for 3 or 4 years. And if you go back to CES pre-pandemic, like people were showing up, with these concepts. Yeah. These now are still, they're still the same concept, but they're more refined. They're much closer to consumer sort of output if they decide to go ahead. Yeah. But, I think we're still at that. We're waiting for the next jump, whatever that technology might be, to allow us to take it. And I still don't think we're quite there yet.
I wonder if, particularly if you refer to mobile devices, etc., that battery to me seems to be the big thing that needs to be fundamentally overhauled. Yeah. We've said it before that if you get something like an iPhone or a Samsung phone or whatever, but you get a battery in there that lasts for a month between charges, then you've got a game changer sort of thing happening right there. Obviously, that would lead you to change the form factors themselves, because the batteries can last longer, but then you can think of a whole bunch of other series of tech that could be dramatically improved thanks to even just an overhaul of that, like being, maybe electric cars might be another example of that, where you get much more range and much more use out of it between charges.
Well, I think you're right. And I think if you think about processing power, that's really still, you're held back in your phone. And when I talk about that, I'm not talking about, video or anything like that. Obviously, we've got enough to do video for, 3-4 hours on your phone, well beyond probably what you can actually store on there. But I'm talking about other sort of technologies like voice recognition. So if you put everything into, say, something the size of a watch that lasts for a month without needing to charge, and you can talk your texts in there, you don't need to type anymore, and, you don't really care about viewing the screen, or you can use this to cast to any screen that might be in the vicinity, then suddenly, as you say, you've got a game-changing technology. But we'll see. We'll see what takes off. I mean, people still have a lot to say in whether or not a technology is actually viable.
Yeah, indeed. One last thing from CES was this, I believe it was called the Samsung Odyssey Arc, which was like a massive screen, curved screen that you could obviously put horizontally, but you could also twist and have it like stand up vertically, and in portrait mode, so that it goes, and because of the curve, it goes above your head. So I guess you get fully immersed in it or whatever. That's the sort of thing, like, you just kind of look at it and you go, yeah, that sounds like it might be fun. But it might also mean that we're moving towards an environment where we're just going to be enveloped by screens at some point.
Very true. I mean, look, let's face it, it's your own mini IMAX person, like that, greater than your peripheral vision, curved, gives you the probably the full experience. But it's interesting that, now we're going to big screens for one person.
Yeah.
That's going to be a trend that I think, we might see more of in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. Nice big episode to start the year, covered a fair bit, and looking forward to 2022 and seeing what topics we end up covering this year.
Well, that's right. Who can tell? But it's the start of another year, and I'm sure it'll roll out with the unexpected as always.
Absolutely. All right, so don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices. And we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.